Good evening, everyone. Apologies for the late start. We've been having some technical difficulties. If you're tuning us with us online, thank you for joining us and thank you for coming tonight in the room as well. We welcome you all. And just let you know, this meeting will be available for those who are online. Those who are in the room. This meeting is recorded and being streamed on our Facebook page. So if you want to watch it, you're welcome to do so. And if you're not following our Facebook page, please do so to keep yourself up to date. For tonight, we're going to have two topics. One of them about the Gungahlin Health Centre and Northside Hospital update. From ACT Health, we got Sally and team here to give us the presentation. We're also going to go through the Gungahlin District Strategy and Territory Plan. The presentation will be done by Peter on behalf of GCC. So these are the two presentations we are going through tonight. And if you have any questions while you're watching online, you're welcome to post your comments so that we can address those questions as well. Without further ado, probably I will just welcome Gungahlin Health update from Sally and teams. Sorry, missed your name. Caitlin. All right, thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you. Thanks. Hi everyone, thanks for having me. I am Caitlin Bladen. I'm an executive branch manager in infrastructure policy and planning with ACT Health. This is a new role and I am new to the role, so if you have any questions tonight, I'm happy to take them. May also need to take some on notice. To start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet, the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging leaders. I would also like to acknowledge any other families with ties to these lands. And I would like to acknowledge the significant amount that we can learn about caring for our country, our skies and our environment from the longest surviving culture, and acknowledge that I personally still have much to learn. So I have the pleasure of coming to talk to you tonight about some health services that are planned for Canberra's North, Canberra generally, and also specifically Gungahlin. So the government is investing significantly in the health of Canberrans. In the area that I'm here to talk to you about, that's reflected in the infrastructure investment, which is being made across all three hospital campuses, as well as in the community health infrastructure, which really reflects the government's priorities that every Canberran should be able to access the healthcare they need, when they need it and where they need it. So currently in Canberra's North, sorry you can't see the slides in the room, but I have a map here which demonstrates where the health facilities in Canberra's North are located, the public health facilities, including the two public hospitals in the north, University of Canberra Hospital and the North Canberra Hospital in Bruce, and a range of health centres and walk-in clinics across the north of Canberra as well. The map does indicate that the government is also investigating new health centres in the north of Canberra, one out in West Belconnen and one in North Gungahlin. So, community health infrastructure. This will be just telling you what I'm sure you all already know, but the government has 4 community health facilities in the Gungahlin region. We have the Gungahlin Community Health Centre, the Walk-in Centre, the Ngunnawal Child's Health Clinic and the Gungahlin Child and Family Centre. In addition to this, the government has committed to building 4 new health centres, community health centres across the next decade. These will be across the territory. So there will be one in South Tuggeranong, one in North Gungahlin, one in the inner south and one in West Belconnen, as I mentioned earlier. So the government has committed funding to this health centre initiative, and in this year's budget committed $16.6 million over 4 years to design and construct the health centre out in South Tuggeranong, and to finalise the site investigation and early design work for both the inner south and the North Gungahlin health centres. So again, And I'm sure I'm telling you things that you already know, but Gungahlin is obviously an area of significant population growth, but overall the ACT has been seeing significant population growth and will continue to grow at a rapid rate. The two areas with the largest population growth are projected to be Belconnen and Gungahlin, also reflecting the largest catchment areas. We are also expecting strong growth in Molonglo, although that's a smaller overall population share of the territory. So Gungahlin is going to grow over the next few years, and so we know we need to invest more in infrastructure of all kinds, including health infrastructure, and especially that health infrastructure which brings it closer to people's homes in the community. So where are we going to build these new health centres? That is the work we're doing now. As I mentioned, we've been funded to do ongoing site investigations, feasibility work and design work. So we're progressing that work. We are, as part of that, in 2022, the team undertaking the work undertook a scan of potential existing facilities. No potential existing facilities that were suitable were found, so they didn't meet the site requirements, including, size, format, etc. So the proposal is now that we develop these facilities on a greenfield site, so an undeveloped site, and build new buildings. So that's something that we will continue to investigate with through the design and feasibility stage. And we understand that the draft, which I'm sure you all know more about than me, but the draft Gungahlin District Strategy identified potential sites which may be suitable for a range of residential and non-residential uses. So all of these sites are kind of, I think, back before government for considering how best to use these sites, including the potential use for any health facilities into the future. So I guess the next question is, what will be in the health? So where will it be and what will we do there? So the question around what services could be provided, it will be informed by a range of things, including our very sophisticated health service planning, but also what we hear from the community. And that conversation started last year as part of the Designing Health Services for Our Community consultation that we ran to inform both the Northside Hospital and a range of other programs that ACT Health and Canberra Health Services have been undertaking. So what we've heard from that engagement is that the kind of services that people would like to see is an increase in paediatrics, an increase in mental health, an increase in walk-in centres, hospitals and pregnancy services. We understand that people are happy to travel to get the health needs that best, the health services that best meet their needs, and that decisions around where people will access care is really driven by urgency, wait times, and availability of the services that are offered at those places. So basically we're going to do a range of consultation, a range of clinical services planning to better plan and understand what kind of services we can deliver in these centres. The kinds of things that are included on those lists include things like physiotherapy, podiatry, nutrition, maternal and child health, diabetes or other services, women's healthcare services, drug and alcohol services, mental health care and pathology. So there's a whole suite of public health services that we may consider how best to match the community needs, the health needs of the community, and what the community is telling us they want to see in those health centres through this next process that we'll be undertaking. To reflect, the centres will be designed with flexibility in mind so that we can make sure we're delivering services that reflect the needs of the community as they're opened, but also over time as those needs may change, reflecting the changing populations. And we're really excited to continue to engage with the community on these health centres, which we will be doing through next year, and we look forward to having those conversations. So this is certainly by no means a fait accompli. We're looking forward to talking to everyone, and there will be a long and deep engagement process for everyone to talk to us about these community health centres. Now, the other big ticket item obviously is the new Northside Hospital. I'm obviously very happy. I think last time I came here we were showing concept designs for Northside Hospital and some site information and service information about Northside Hospital. We now obviously know that there will be a new Northside Hospital the government has committed to, and it will be at the site in Bruce. It will be a much bigger hospital than what's there currently, reflecting the increasing population and the increasing demand for hospital services on the north and also across Canberra more broadly. And the process of engagement for that will also be detailed and in depth over the next few years. But we've also gone out recently and actually done a level of grassroots engagement with North Canberra Hospital staff themselves to understand how they feel about the new Northside Hospital, the things that they would like to see in a hospital, the kinds of things that are important to the staff who work at that hospital. And what we really heard was people very interested in the design considerations through the next phase of the project, including wayfinding, things like storage, which potentially, doesn't spring to mind, but is obviously a significant issue. The width and size of rooms and hallways, again, reflecting the need to move around patient beds with all the equipment that is sometimes in there as well. And also, of course, they're very interested to understand the types and nature of employee facilities that will be provided in the new Northside Hospital. So now that we've heard from the clinical staff at North Canberra Hospital, we're really keen to get out and speak to everyone about this really new and exciting prospect for the ACT. And so as I outlined, we're going to be doing a long and detailed community engagement that's going to commence early in the new year. And we'll be very excited to come back and talk to you and talk to your communities and run a range of different ways to engage with the community through that process. That's it. Does anyone have any questions? Sure.
Our understanding is that the only site actively being pursued is the site in Casey. I think it's called 13 of 132 or something.
Okay.
Along with emergency services and the potential indoor sports facility. Is that accurate?
I understand that, as I said, sorry, this is all new, very new to me, but yes, I understand that site is being considered by a range of government agencies for a range of different functions. Okay. And the decision about how that site will be used is currently before government.
Okay, before government, okay. Thank you.
No worries.
Look, congratulations on what you're trying to do, by the way.
Thanks.
And I was actually a member of the group, or one of the groups that, I'm not sure how many there were, that was consulted.
On the panel?
On the panel, mm-hmm. Yeah, on the panel. And the thing that came out to me was not that you guys are trying to do the right thing, but the real problem is the integration with all the other bits and pieces we've got in the community on health, and in particular with the things like the health funds, the federal government with their aged care and their disability stuff. It's frankly a mess, and particularly associated with the whole business of our records. Mm-hmm. Even if you're willing to be able to, I'm happy for everyone to know all my health records, right? But it's really hard to actually give them to people, and for people to collect the things like that. So I don't think you're going to get terribly far unless you can actually engage the support of the community more directly. So rather than you guys trying to beat some sense into some of these other places, you need to somehow engage with us, and so that we can support you to do this stuff. Because I don't think it's going to work unless that happens.
Yeah. Thank you. We do hear a lot about service fragmentation and difficult navigation of various services. And obviously it's the focus of, I'm sure, a huge body of work. But yeah, thank you. I take your comment.
Yeah. So and in particular, there didn't seem to be anyone trying to engage with the health insurance companies.
Okay.
I think that's really important because everything flows from the money, as we know, and there's a lot of money collected by the health funds, and it doesn't seem to flow back to the people who actually need it. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions, Peter? On one of the slides, it talks about what services could be provided, and then you have some 6 items on it. Are we expecting all of it to be in the health hub, or?
Look, I think it's sort of an example of what could be there and an example of what may be there. We're actually, we're not 100% certain that there'll be a fixed range of services. There may be services that may be able to offer outreach from those areas. So, there is always the potential to change and flex different service mixes as required and as needed. So at this point, we're really just trying to understand what the best service mix may be and ensure that the design of the facility allows for the delivery of those services from within that
Okay, so
facility.
nothing has been done.
Nothing
but
has
this
been,
could be
no.
one of those services, or maybe multiple.
That's right, absolutely, yeah. It's unlikely to have just one. It would probably be a mixture, yeah.
And how big we are thinking, like?
Look, I would have to take that on notice. I'm not 100% sure of the facility, the proposed sizes of the facilities.
Yeah.
I think that I understand that Conda, which was the South Tuggeranong Community Facility, is a 12-room consult room facility with 2 multi-purpose rooms. So that's a relatively decent-sized
And what
facility.
kind of facilities they have? Just curious.
The service mix has still not also been determined.
For that
for that
side as
site,
well, is it? Okay. The other question on the time frame, what's the milestone looking like?
I understand that we were funded for the next 2 years to continue this design and feasibility work with a view to returning, I understand, with returning to for a funding bid for the next 2, which is Inner South and North Casey, to business case for government consideration in 2 years' time.
Okay. And so the other question as well, like at the moment we don't have either GPs, when I say GPs, what's the word? The late night, what's it called? CALD, is it?
CALMS?
Yeah, CALMS. So we don't have that facility in Gungahlin. So with this health hub, would you consider having, because technically speaking, in Canberra we are less, less in capacity in terms of health and infrastructure. So, and we don't have comms or anything. So it'd be good to have some kind of things attached to it.
Mm-hmm. Sure, I'm not. Look, I'm not sure of the model of CALMS, and I only know it as a user of the service. So I'm actually not sure, but I can definitely ask, who runs it and what it, and what those decisions are. I'm not sure. Sorry, but I can try and find out.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yep.
A question from a Facebook person.
Sure.
When the consultation begins in 2024, will that include engaging with community organisations?
Yes, it'll be a very comprehensive engagement strategy, including community organisations, stakeholders, the general community, clinical workforce, community councils, peak organisations.
Okay.
Will be
Great.
out. Everyone will be sick of us.
Great, thank you.
No worries.
I think considering the population in Gungahlin, so it's quite young population, so the maternal and child health, it's kind of probably I would say, because at the moment most of our babies would probably born in Gungahlin Drive. I don't know, you know what I mean? Because we have to go a long way. We were hoping to have the hospital in Gungahlin, but it's been taken in Belcon. So, something with those ones, and with the mental health. Would be good key things. So I think maybe during the process you might come and do some kind of community engagement. I'm not sure what process you would go through to determine what needs to be in the other districts and what needs to be in Gungahlin. Mm-hmm. But I would suggest maybe consider that Gungahlin doesn't have any of these ones, because in terms of hospital and services, so maybe we could be qualified for all of this, but I would be waiting for the process to start. So at the moment, are you saying it's going to be 2024? Is it?
Yeah. We are in the process of sort of commencing the development of the engagement strategy itself, and then we'll commence implementation next year of the engagement.
Yeah, and as you said, like a couple of questions as you have taken notice, if you can come back to us.
Yeah,
that'd be
of course,
incredible.
I will.
So one more question on Facebook.
Yep, one more. Question is, with the North Canberra Hospital, what health services will be in the North Canberra Hospital?
The
So
new.
the new expanded hospital.
Sure.
And then there's a sort of follow-up question, which is a bit tricky perhaps, and will it reduce wait times due to the GP tax?
I'm not sure I can answer that. I think the idea is that we will be increasing the provision of health services, which ultimately you would hope would reduce wait times, but I'm not sure about the interrelationship of various policies, including the GP tax.
Okay.
And in relation to what services will be in the North Side Hospital when it is built, that is also a decision that's currently before government. They are considering the the services that could be there, whether or not there might be any benefits in moving or combining or services across now that both hospitals are under the same operator, whether or not there are any benefits that can be gained for the community through potentially looking at the service distribution. So TBD on that one, but it will be a bigger hospital.
Okay, thank you.
Probably this is the last question. So in terms of the hospital, the new hospital, so it says community engagement will commence in early 2024. So are we saying maybe it might take another decade to get the full running capacity hospital? Because if we're going to start by 2024, then...
So we will start the engagement in 2024. The commitment from the government was to commence construction by mid-decade, and so I think at the moment we're hoping that it's a big project. It'll take a while to build, but we're hoping to have it operational early in the 2030s. So yes, there is a process and a process to go through, but it's we're shaping the hospital now. We're hoping that the conversation with the community can help us do that.
Yeah, and the health hub concept, I think first time when we heard was a couple of years back. So they said we're going to come up with this cool health hub concept, and then after that, no one talked about it. Every time we went back, no one responded it. So because it's taken like kind of 2 years to come where we are now, can we assume that there won't be any further delay, or is it still?
Look, that is the intention. I think the government's given a strong signal that they're committed. They have committed the funding to South Tuggeranong to build it. So South Tuggeranong will be the first cab off the rank, and then they do want to consider business cases for these the next two, the Inner South and the North Gungahlin, in the next 2 years. So
Cool.
hopefully not.
Excellent.
Great.
All right. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your time. I appreciate that.
Thanks for having us.
No worries. I can put this one for you. We're going to have thank you so much for coming again and doing this presentation. We do really appreciate it. So now we're going to, as we announced previously, we're going to talk about the Gungahlin District Strategy Plan. I'd like to invite Peter to come and do this presentation for us. Thanks, Peter.
Props. Thanks very much. This is, we're coming to the end of a 4-year process around building a new planning system for the ACT. It's not something the Community Council's been involved in, it's something the ACT Government's Planning Directorate has been leading. And about a month ago, the final portions of the overall Act and all the new territory plans and maps and these new district strategies have all been produced. And so I was trying to give people a little bit of a flavour of what's changed in the planning system as a result, and it's a really, really high-level overview, and then give a little bit of a skim over the Gungahlin district strategy. So hopefully that goes. To give you some idea, this is a printout of a bound copy of just the district strategies portion of the territory plan. So it's not the territory plan itself, it's not the legislation, it's just the common portion of the district strategies. You'll see all these coloured tabs, there's one for every district, but you get some appreciation for how much material is to digest in all this. So the way this looks is that there's an overall piece of legislation that controls how planning is done in the ACT, and that's the Planning Act. And you can see in the diagram here that that kind of sits over the top of it. And the pieces we'll talk about today are the ACT planning strategy and the district strategies on the left. I think I could do this with a clever build, but that might be beyond it. Nope, that's too hard. On the left, and they provide, I guess, the overall vision and direction for what the actual territory plan, which is on the right-hand side of that diagram, will actually do. So on the left, it's really kind of the overview and objectives, and on the right, it's the policies and design guides and specifications that will actually implement this vision. That's how that model works. So you've got to be very careful when you see the word strategy attached to a document. It's kind of aspirational and goal setting, and you really need to see the word specification or policy, and that's actually the requirements. And in fact, in the new planning system, a policy is mandatory requirements, and a specification are the objectives you're trying to reach to be compliant with the policy. It sounds a bit airy-fairy, but I'll try and give you a bit of a flavour for that. So what hasn't changed is this idea that all of the blocks in Canberra all are associated with a particular zone. And the zones have cryptic names like RZ1, RZ2, RZ3, which are residential zone 1, residential zone 2, residential zone 1, RZ1 is a traditional single house in a block, through to RZ5, which is blocks of units and so on. And there are commercial zones designed to be core of a town centre, CZ1, through to multi-use developments like CZ5 and so on. And there's zones for community use, zones for recreation, zones for urban space, zones for rural land, and so on and so on and so on. And the idea is that every block is assigned to one of these, and there'll be a set of rules which are encapsulated in these specifications and in policies now that will control or drive what development's allowed where. So you can't build a brick factory on an RZ1 block. That's just not a permitted use for that particular zone, for example. So in terms of how that used to work, we used to have for every zone a zone table, and we used to have things like precinct codes, like the Gungahlin Town Centre Precinct Code, which the Community Council did a lot of work to improve over the last 5 years. And what's going to happen is things like precinct codes and those sort of bigger than a block type issues will get rolled into the district strategies and the district policies. And all of the specific zone tables have now become zone policies and zone specifications. So we end up with district specifications and policies, and we end up with zone-specific specifications and policies. So in some ways it's a much cleaner system. The total amount of paper is actually slightly more, but the actual model is a little bit better. And that's tried, and that's sort of caught in the slide. For our in-person audience here, if you actually watch the live stream, you get to see the slides as well, which is what people are seeing online. So in addition to those new specifications and policies, some design guides have been introduced as well. The design guides, as the next slide suggests, and I'm just going to sneak over here and remind myself what it says, are requirements and objectives that developers must meet when their developments go over a certain scale. So there's an urban design guide which relates to quite large areas over 1 hectare, and then there's a house specific design guide that gives guidance to developers on what's appropriate in on sort of a house scale size development. There's also the sensitive biodiversity design guide, which applies to very large developments over very large areas. So that's kind of the new bits of the design guides and the specifications and the policies that I mentioned before. Now, so that was sort of touching on the sort of the mechanics of the territory plan, which was on the right-hand side of the first picture. I'll now go back to the policy side of that first picture and remind people that all of this is anchored around something that was produced in 2018 called the ACT Planning Strategy. And it's a pretty important document, and it's the document that sets out, and I keep going over here to see my screen over here. It sets out the key objectives for what the ACT planning system is meant to achieve. And things like compact and efficient are at the very top of that list. And that's one of the ways of saying a denser, a more livable city. So that's a part of that agenda around that. Now, in the Gungahlin context, the important thing here is when you look at the 2018 planning strategy, it identifies areas where there's going to be denser developments. And in the picture, some people can see, you can see that along the light rail corridor, the 2018 strategy is predicting or outlining an ambition for much denser housing along that light rail corridor. And if you're a Gungahlin person, you'll also notice there's a big blue dot off to the west, and that's around Casey. So as far back as 2018, the Casey Group Centre was identified as a location for denser housing. On that map, it also shows things like the old CSI road site at Ginderry as a potential development, sort of the Majura Valley as an area that they might investigate future residential development, and so on. And in orange, there are the suburbs that are still yet to be built in Gungahlin, like Jacker and the northern parts of Jacker, remainder of Taylor, and the suburb of Kenny. So that's the first piece, that sort of, if you like, an all of ACT policy strategy and policy principles. And with the new planning system, they've introduced this idea of district strategies. And the district strategies set out, again, an overall ambition for the sort of things that need to be laid out. And the important thing here is this is not a strategy for what the government as a whole going to do. These are strategies that guide the planning directorate in building their rules for how things will be built. So you need to be careful when you read a district strategy and it says, oh, this site could be a school and this site could be for future intense building and so on. That's not a commitment at all that anyone will actually do that, or that there will actually be funding to do some of these things. So you've got to be careful when you read these things that this is a planning framework that still needs funding and investment to actually make it happen. So the 5 themes that are pulled out are the idea of maintaining a blue-green network, and how do we maintain the garden city, water and green corridors, providing economic access and opportunity across the city. How do we equally distribute opportunities for employment and access to services? The next one is managing strategic movement. How do you provide transport equitably and effectively across the city? How do you build inclusive centres and communities? How do you develop our shopping centres at the local and group level and provide community facilities? And the 5th element of the district strategy is how do you build sustainable neighbourhoods, which in most cases boils down to how are you going to do housing more effectively and typically more densely. So in Gungahlin, I've taken the single map they give where they try to put in the district strategy everything that they're talking about on a single map. And I can assure you, even when you blow this map up with very high resolution, it's still almost unreadable. And certainly the example I'm giving you online is in the slide deck is also unreadable. But it does identify, I guess, a number of elements where there are a series of initiatives identified in the district strategy that are intended to deliver better outcomes in each of those 5 areas. Remember, sustainable neighbourhoods, how do we get better housing? So in some parts of Canberra, that means allowing blocks that are zoned RZ1 over 800 square metres to build a second dwelling, which would be separately titled up to 120 square metres, so sort of large granny flats. And that's obviously targeted in areas that are not Gungahlin, because we've got very few blocks that are over 800 square metres. Whereas you'll find, for example, in Belconnen and particularly Tuggeranong, there are a lot of blocks that are over 800 square metres that could be eligible for that sort of densification strategy. But there are a number of strategies, sort of half a dozen strategies for each of those 5 key themes or initiatives to build out, develop Gungahlin. And I think it's pretty important that most people take a chance to look at the district strategy and see what they are. The other thing the district strategy does is identify a series of areas or locations inside a district, in this case Gungahlin, where there may be opportunity for future residential or non-residential development. And they're not shown on the map. Most of them are rural type blocks in the southern portion of Gungahlin, but I've got some pictures of that a little later on. So the sort of things that are in the Gungahlin district strategy include making sure that we maintain our green corridors and restore our waterways. That the floor space reserved in the town centre is retained for future commercial opportunities, i.e. office space, but also that there's an actual investment effort to drive attract development around office space, that the public transport between the town centres and Casey is improved, the road infrastructure is further developed. And one I particularly like, that for under inclusive centres and communities, 5 initiatives to deliver new schools, the tennis centre, the Casey Park, and I quote the exact wording here, other new community and recreational facilities to address existing identified gaps and future demand. And so anyone who's been along to the Gungahlin Community Council for the last 5 or 10 years has known that we have been banging on about how poorly served Gungahlin is for community and recreational facilities. So it's been recognised, and the next step, of course, is what to do about it. And then the last one is the sustainable neighbourhoods, which in the case of Gungahlin is really building out the remaining strategies. A lot of the densification strategies that inner South Canberra and North Canberra are dealing with don't really apply to us because of our much smaller block sizes and we're a greenfields build. Most of our densification challenges and new housing opportunities are around the high-rise developments we've seen, not only in the town centre, but also at places like Casey. Okay, so I promised that we would whiz through some of these key sites and areas. This is meant to be a whistle-stop tour. Again, just to remind you of this weighty document. The Gungahlin section's really not too bad at all to read, so just going to the Gungahlin piece is okay. But we will go through the key sites that are identified in the district strategy that are potential for development, and they grade them into 3 different categories. Category 1 is those sites that could be developed in the next 0 to 5 years. Category 2 is 0 to 10 years, and Category 3 is 0 to 15 years. So it's really kind of a long-term, quite long-term, and very long-term kind of time frames, I think. The first one they describe in the district strategy as the entertainment precinct, but it really is most of the core of the town centre and how you bring more vibrancy, favourite planning word, to the town centre. And this is tied up to the East Gungahlin project being run by the Suburban Land Agency to look at how best to build out the eastern half of the Gungahlin town centre, but also to make sure that whatever's built there, because that will definitely be very mixed in terms of residential and commercial and other services, that they coexist in a way that you can have an entertainment complex and a bit of a nightlife environment. So that would be quite a challenging piece of work. But the specific blocks that are called out that require further planning and could have further uses, excuse me, are the 2 blocks in Casey that we were talking about earlier, that have been identified by by 3 ACT directorates as being suitable for things they think they need to do. That's emergency services are looking to build a new fire and ambulance station there. ACT Health are looking to build a health centre there of some form, as we just heard. And the Sports and Recreation Directorate have indicated they're trying to establish an indoor sports facility in that site. It's been coordinated by the Planning Directorate. We haven't really had an update for some months about exactly how that's happening, and ACT Health just now we're saying it's now in a decision for government, which usually means a bunch of recommendations have been given up to ACT Cabinet and a political decision will now be made. So I guess we wait to see how that plays out. So that's the first site. Long history, several articles on the GCC website about that location and how important it is to building out the Casey Group Centre. Those sites are also scheduled to get at least 100 dwellings of residential as well as all those other services. The next site that's been identified is the Gungahlin Homestead site. So this is the quite large block between the Barton Highway and Gungahlin Drive, sort of where they come together. We had a presentation 2 or 3 meetings ago from the organisation that owns that site, and they have concept designs to build a very large retirement village and aged care facility around the Gungahlin Homestead, which is heritage listed. Quite an exciting development, and certainly very sorely needed in Gungahlin, where we have no aged care facility currently, one coming, and only 2 retirement villages. So I think most people would think that'd be a great thing. So that's one of the sites being considered. It actually has the lease there is actually a Commonwealth lease, not an ACT government lease, for some quirk of history. So the next site is a sliver of land right next to the Federal Highway, sort of across the road from Watson, where there's a historic homestead which has a name, Arnold's home. So there's a quite famous architect's house on that site. It's not a particularly large parcel of land, and it's unclear what that could be. But again, its proximity to the main Federal Highway means it gets wrapped up in a whole bunch of national capital planning rules. But it is a site that is obviously close to other residential areas and would be a candidate for residential. So that's one of the other sites. That's a Category 2 site. And then there are 2 Category 3 sites that essentially encompass EPIC, the exhibition centre. So there's a big block that includes the trotting course, and then a small, which is the one that's on the screen now, and a smaller block below. And this is all tied up in a piece of work that's ongoing about what the future of EPIC is, and how much of it could or should be developed, how much of it could or should be retained, and for what purposes, to deliver what services. There have been multiple commitments to deliver a large-scale community facility to host community events of 1,000 people sitting down and so on. And that's currently being addressed by an interim upgrade to one of the pavilions, but something permanent is potentially part of that project. So that's the first block, and then the second block is that piece right up against what is now Flemington Road. The Community Council made a submission to the Planning Authority in response to the draft district strategy. We were very critical of how the strategy was framed up. It made a lot of assertions about what Gungahlin is and isn't, which were, I guess, to be honest, just not right. And unfortunately, that's all been taken out. So the actual overview of where Gungahlin is now much more accurate, and acknowledges, as I mentioned before, the need for further investment in community facilities, sporting and other. So that was positive. But some of the things that we did flag as being a concern remain a concern. Perhaps the biggest one is just the danger is people see these district strategies and think these are commitments to actually deliver stuff, when it's really just a planning framework to guide how land use planning is done. But that doesn't mean it wouldn't be useful if that happened. So the strategies to implement them, really there's no one who's responsible for implementing them. There's no way of joining up all the directorates, although the directorates sometimes are aware of and are involved with the district strategies. It doesn't really pull them together, and I think the opportunity there would be great. And finally, of course, it doesn't commit any funding or any government commitment to deliver on all the initiatives that are articulated in here, sort of 20 or 30 for every one of the districts. So we think it's a good step, but it really doesn't build a I guess, citizen-centric view of what's going to happen and actually deliver on delivering that. So where we are in terms of next steps, as I said before, the legislation is passed. Come the 27th of November, the new planning system will come into being. Is in action, but it doesn't activate until the 27th of November. So if you submit a DA before then, you'll get evaluated under the old system. If you submit a DA after that, you'll be evaluated under the new system. You'll be moving from a rules-based system to an outcomes-based system. Whilst that is happening, there's yet another inquiry into the planning system and all the documentation associated with it, being run by the ACT Standing Committee on Planning, and we, the Community Council, need to decide whether we make a submission, and if so, what should we say? So I'm asking everyone listening or watching or reading this later to have a look at the district strategies. If you're really keen, have a look at the full territory plan. But give us your feedback on what you would like to see, where you think it may not work. Some of the best material to quickly digest it is in the training section of the new planning system webpage, and I've got that on the PowerPoint slide. And you can, of course, contact us on Facebook or via email, or even by ringing us on the phone. So that sort of hopefully gives you a flavour for what the district strategy is all about. It's very much driven by the Planning Directorate, who are all about land use. They don't actually fund community centres on a piece of land zoned for community use. But part of the challenge we've had in Gungahlin is we actually don't have enough land zoned the right way for all the things we need to get in terms of sporting and community facilities. And with that, I'll take any questions and look forward to any feedback. Thank you. Anyone with a question in the room? Yep, great. I'll grab my check.
Yes, Peter, I assume, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that presentation. I can see from the size of the document that it's not easy to condense in a short time everything that's in there. I've had a squiz at it, and there's just two things I wanted to, it's not nice to not ask a question, but I will not ask a question. I'll just make a comment and see if you have any comments about it. Mm-hmm. But and I might point out that I apologize for not being at the workshops, because I'm a new kid on the block in Harrison and just started in January, so I missed the fun of the workshops. So the two things I want to take a look at. The one is what the community told us, and you've mentioned quite a few things there, and I would like to reiterate about the community spaces, because I think we are a community. Let's put it this way, we should be a community. I mean, there's different definitions of what that is, but I certainly would hope that we are a community. And in the feedback talked about creating more meeting spaces. And already in just the short time I've been here, I realize that sometimes, we've got this in a central location, but out in the neighborhoods, say Harrison or whatever, it's not always easy to find a place. Sometimes I'm at a meeting in a cafe and I can't hear anything because there's a lot of things. So I think that's an important point about having, creating more meeting spaces, whether they're at a school or they're at a commercial or they're a specific designation. I think that's worth dealing with. To get more citizen participation. That's really what it's about, and some social cohesion. So obviously the council has an important role in that. The other point is that in reading the district strategy, they mention that the population in Canberra is going to be almost 800,000 by 2060.
Yeah, 2060. That
and
sounds about
I
right.
realized, just talking about next year is difficult sometimes. But I guess my point is that according to what I could figure out from the Treasury's population estimates, their projection is that in 2060 there will be about 148,000 in Gungahlin.
That sounds right, yep.
Yeah, which in 2050, which corresponds with the district plan, put it around 133,000.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's a 50% increase. And now I don't know if that's too many or not enough or whatever. A projection takes a trend. But I think if we talk about citizen participation, then we need to look at more than just the data. We need to look at what is the impact of a certain level of population. And I'm thinking, and specifically, I took a look at the section on water, and what it talks about is infrastructure. It says that for the water supply, there's be enough infrastructure for long term. But they say in terms of new reservoirs. But then if you look at a bigger picture, I mean, with climate change and the other things, and consumption of water, what are the implications of that? And I'm not saying we have to wait till 2060 to figure that out. So I'm just making a comment that I see that as an issue which just the use of water today is something.
So with your general comments, I'll give you a couple of general responses. In my time at the Community Council, which spans about 12 or 13 years now, the most common theme is that there's been decent planning, but there's been poor implementation of a plan. So, for example, all of the major arterial roads in Gungahlin, clearly enough space has been made for those major arterial roads to be 2 lanes each way, dual carriageways. But certainly in the period of the early 2000s, when the population was growing extremely quickly, the rate at which the arterial roads are being duplicated lagged demand by as much as 5 or 10 years, which just created enormous frustration and has built amongst the community a strong mindset that everything is late in Gungahlin, or it's done piecemeal. And so we have, there's a lot, if you sort of mention the words town centre to anyone in Gungahlin, there's a combination of arms going up about the road system being hopeless, followed by the parking being hopeless, and then mentioning the roads again for a second time. And so I think the key message we need to take back, we have just mentioned many times before, and this is true, for example, the Casey community have pointed out that the large residential development proposed for the Casey site in and of itself, is quite a big, it's quite challenging visually, but it's going to take a road situation which is already quite congested around Horse Park Drive and that area, Clary Hermes Drive, and make it much worse, particularly with the development of a new college, particularly with the development of the aged care facility I mentioned before, and this new development, and the new health centre and the emergency, all of that, right? The point being, we don't want to wait 5 years and suddenly realise the road infrastructure is not great. We need to start, the government and us people, need to start on that journey to build the infrastructure out, not only for roads, but also quality parks, additional meeting spaces in individual group and local centres, expanding our very limited footprint of sporting facilities. All of that needs to be accelerated behind the development, the populating of the open spaces and the densification of the population. Someone's just asked a question online about the electorate of Yerraby currently includes all of Gungahlin plus Kaylin and Gungahlin. It won't be long before we're a sufficiently large electorate that it'll just be Gungahlin, and Gungahlin and Kaylin will go over to Belconnen, although Belconnen will end up being an enormous electorate as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But there continue to be real challenges with getting the priorities and sequencing right, and trying to get infrastructure to meet the growth built ideally ahead of time, but at least in sync with other developments, rather than building high-rise units everywhere, and then going, oh my goodness, there's no traffic, there's nowhere for them, no decent access for them to reach green spaces. How do we retrofit that when it's kind of obvious to anyone that that will become an issue? So.
Yeah. Can I just make one comment on that?
Sure.
The concept of integration was mentioned, and of course, in my experience, if you increase the lanes in a road, you get more traffic. It just keeps going and going and going. Not to say that we shouldn't do it, but integrating with public transport and the other things, it's a big job, and it's a political issue, basically, because some people like cars, and the cars are necessary, and even if you get electric cars, you're still going to...
So, but I mean, part of this is a demographic, and if you've got lots of young kids, you've got to get to school and childcare. A bicycle or a bus followed by light rail, that's probably not what the option you're going to take. So, in greenfields communities like Gungahlin, or the young demographic, you're always going to see more cars. Plus, we have such a low employment footprint here. Almost everyone's job is somewhere else, and so you're going to have to travel a fair distance to do that, because again, we haven't had the incentives to drive office space at the right scale into the town centre to create an employment hub that will minimise the issues you've just flagged. So there's a whole stack of interlocking and interwoven issues. That's true.
Yep, and that's what strategy is about, the mix, basically. So it's not easy.
Yeah,
Thanks very much for that.
No worries. Cheers. Anything else? No one online, at least.
You mentioned, Peter, right at the beginning, efficiency. That the planning thing was to do with efficiency. Now, I assume that efficiency means economic efficiency.
Well, see, this is one of the fun conversations we've had for 4 years with the Directorate around, you're moving to an outcomes-based planning system. Outcomes for who? Are we looking for fastest densification of a particular block? Are we looking for greatest revenue, greatest increase in lease, conversion of lease change charges? And it's still a little bit vague, even with the final version of the planning system. So we're not going to know until we get a little bit into it, and there is no...
That's the big problem with, or one of the big problems with the whole planning thing, is that the planners have good plans, but when it comes to implementation, it's the money that determines what actually happens. And unless we get those... Canberra was designed around and built, as we know, on the idea that community... that Canberra wouldn't cost the rest of Australia anything, right? So we've lost that.
Well and truly.
Right? But we need to go back to that.
Yeah.
So how do we get back to
they're great questions, and trying to get new thinking has been very difficult, and so even the planning reform began with a whole bunch of potential creative approaches off the table. So it's been constrained. So it's not really radically new. It's sort of modified. No, look, the answer is I don't know, and I don't think we will know until we've tried it for a year or two. And because the system has come out with no measurement framework or observable metrics, it's hard to know how that's going to play out. But as I was at a meeting as recently as last week, and someone at the Institute of Architects was putting the question. It's like, well, you've identified 45,000 blocks in the ACT that are over 800 square metres. What do you think the conversion rate will be for all those blocks to build a 120 square metre separately titled dwelling on that block? And the answer is they don't know. Because in part it'll depend on the lease variation charge to put unit title another dwelling on your block. And that's not something the planning directorate set, that's set by Treasury. So if you make the lease variation charge so huge that it's commercially not worthwhile doing it, it's not going to happen. But of the 45,000 blocks with 800 square metres, maybe the house that's already there is situated in a way that it's really impractical to build something else. But no one else has been done on that as well. So some of the rule changes to deliver quote unquote better outcomes, more housing diversity, I think a lot of industry and a lot of the community really aren't convinced will make a difference. I mean, even if the mechanism's there, it won't get taken up, and so won't achieve anything. So we'll see. And on that note, I will leave it. No other further questions online. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Peter, for doing it. It was great. Thank you for joining us. If you joined us on Facebook, thank you for joining us as well. And just a closing comment on the topic that we were discussing about Canberra, the way they designed it as a satellite, district. So where every district should have a decent amount of job opportunities, so people can, within the district, they can go and work, they can go to the school, they can do everything mostly within the district. But I think that model didn't properly implemented in Gungahlin, and that's why we see some of the mess and with the roads and with the roads, most of the roads needs duplicates in Gungahlin, and we don't have any dedicated bus lines or anything, or any connectivity on the public transport to other districts. So there are a lot of rooms to improvement, and I think this is probably a good way to start with the Gungahlin district strategy, but also a long way to go. But on that note, we'll finish off.
Can I just, one final thing?
Yeah.
I'd like to present I'm not quite sure, but congratulate Peter, or say how much I appreciate the tremendous amount of work that he's done trying to figure out all these things.
To
Good to acknowledge just
Yeah.
just how much he's done.
That's a great point, Kevin. As I said, thanks again, Peter, for
No worries.
putting it
Lovely.
and comparing to this big document and making us to putting it in a way that everyone can understand and stuff. So if anyone needs to refer to this video, it's available as well. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you for staying tuned with us. Have a good night. We'll see you next month. Thank you, and God bless. Good night.